Well, hello, brother friends and sister friends. Welcome back to the Heart Set Above podcast, where we strive for nearness to God, even in the mess of life. I was recently invited to speak at a women's conference, and the theme that I was given was nearness. They asked me to speak on drawing near to God, but they also asked me to weave in some teaching on fear and anxiety, since that was a very highly requested topic. And so at first I thought, how in the world am I going to tie those two things together, nearness to God and fear and anxiety? But then I considered every client of faith I've ever worked with and what has truly helped them in their fear and anxiety. And if I had to boil it all the way down to the roots, I would say this: drawing near to God is the antidote to fear and anxiety. So in this series, we're going to explore how nearness to God helps us with our fear and anxiety, and just as importantly, how we can practically draw near to Him in our everyday, real life, messy moments. I think especially in faith circles, we hear a lot of abstract language around this, right? Cast your burdens on Him, draw near to God, rest in His presence. Those are beautiful truths, but if we're honest, no one really taught us how to do that. That's why in this series, we're going to break it down faithfully, psychologically, and practically. I want you to walk away not just inspired, but equipped with simple, everyday ways to actually draw near to God in the middle of your fear and your anxiety. So let's start with a little pop psychology. Because let's be honest, we all love a good pop psychology fact, don't we? And as a therapist, I feel like I'd be letting you down if I didn't sprinkle in at least a few. So let me show you how the principle that nearness is never without effect is true in life, in relationships, in our bodies, and even in nature itself. Did you know that dogs' heart rates slow down when they sit next to their owners? And their owners' heart rates slow down too. Nearness is never without effect. Have you ever caught a yawn or the giggles or maybe a bad attitude from someone who's nearby? That's because of something called mirror neurons that live in our brains. They're hardwired to copy the emotions and actions of the people around us. So if someone around you smiles at you, your brain will light up as if you're the one smiling. Nearness is never without effect. Even our language and our mannerisms catch it. Studies show that people unconsciously mimic the accents and phrases and gestures of the people that they spend time with. So if you spend enough time with someone, you might start to sound like them, even pick up their accent. Of course, nobody knows this better than Madonna in the 90s, right? Nearness is never without effect. And here's one that I just found out recently that I love. Couples' heartbeats can actually sync up when they sleep in the same bed. Isn't that amazing? I actually cried to my husband about that when I found out. He travels during the week for work. And when he got home one weekend, I was like, oh no, we're not even sleeping in the same bed Monday through Friday. So our hearts aren't syncing up and we won't be each other's lobsters. Of course, he gave me that classic husband head nod, right? Like, it'll be fine, Ellen. But I think it's powerful evidence that even when we're unconscious, even when we're asleep and unaware of the nearness, nearness is still never without effect. But if nearness is never without effect, then the opposite is also true. Distance is never without effect. We see this physiologically. If a baby is never touched or held, it can fail to thrive, even die. We are literally created to need nearness in order to survive. We see this psychologically. This is what trauma does. It creates distance between the logical and the emotional parts of the brain, distance between the mind and the body, distance in our own lived reality, and almost always distance relationally. And that distance in relationships is devastating. You can be right next to someone physically, but miles apart from them emotionally, and that relationship will wither. We even see this truth in nature all the time. Trees and flowers that don't get enough direct sunlight will actually distort themselves to reach it. You've probably seen a tree growing completely bent to one side or stretching toward the only patch of light near it. That tree is twisting, reshaping, even wounding itself in order to get near that source of life. Nearness is never without effect, and distance is never without effect. If that's true in our bodies, in our relationships, in our emotions, and even in creation itself, how much more true is it when we draw near to God? His nearness always changes us, and distance from Him always leaves its mark, twisting and distorting what He meant to be whole. That's where we're headed in this series. So in the next episode, we'll dig into a question that runs all the way back to Eden. Why do we rush to do instead of learning how to be? And how can being with God before doing for God actually quiet our anxiety and bring us back to center? So until then, may you notice His nearness in small, ordinary moments this week, and let it begin to soothe your soul.